Hi, good evening. Is this mic on? Can you all hear me through the mic? Yes. All right, because I can't hear myself. I'm Cheryl Sterling, the Director of Black Studies, and welcome to our last event for this academic season. And of course, you know, we love doing the Chuina Achebe Legacy Series. It began really as, of course, a homage to Chuina Achebe, but it's a way for us to connect to today's writers and poets who are making a mark in the scene of African literature and African diaspora literature. And tonight, of course, we have Kwame Dawes, who is both, I would say he can be equally claimed by Ghana and by Jamaica. I'm not going to introduce Kwame, however, okay? Just give me 1 second. I have to do all the thanks and everything, and we'll get the program started. So first, please let me give special thanks to the Simon H. Rifkin Fund, the Division of Humanities and the Arts, specifically to our former Dean Eric Weitz, the Office of Government Affairs and the English Department for co-sponsoring this event. We are so lucky to be part of this kind of revitalization of Black Studies and kind of the movement forward that we envision in changing not just the curricula, but in changing kind of the overall structure of the program and the overall relationship with the Harlem community. To this effect, I would really like you all to use social media to big up our program in every which way possible. You know, look us up on Facebook, tweet, and I'm going to give you our tag. I am BSPCCNY. We recently did a conference, the New York African Studies Association conference, and we got some amazing feedback. We had scholars from all over, not just this New York State area, but from around the country, from outside of the country, from West Africa. And we were really able to make a mark with that, and we want to continue making a mark with events like this. So with this, I am going to turn over the podium to Donald Robotham, who is going to be our moderator for the evening. Okay, and Don is a professor at the Graduate Center. I'm going to give you a little bit of his amazing CV, and then he will, of course, introduce our guest of honor, Kwame Dawes. So Don is a graduate of the University of the West Indies, and he obtained his PhD from the University of Chicago in 1987. A critic of the concepts of post-colonialism and postmodernism, he has worked extensively in the English-speaking Caribbean as well as among the gold miners of Ghana and West Africa, focusing on issues of development and concomitant difficulties caused by advanced capitalist globalization. Since September 2008, he has served as the executive officer of the Office of Educational Opportunity and Diversity Programs, a project that provides services to all graduate students enrolled at CUNY, but particularly those from underserved groups. Since May 2012, Don has been serving as an inaugural director of the GC's Advanced Research Collaborative. In this capacity, he works directly with the GC research centers, institutes, and interdisciplinary programs to foster, and I'm quoting, connections between the research activities of CUNY faculty at the colleges and GC research programs and seminars, and provide a home for outstanding visiting scholars, postdocs, and others to collaborate with faculty and students. So let's welcome Don, and then we'll welcome Kwame. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, evening to everybody. Thank you for the kind words. Totally undeserved, but there it is. It's an absolute delight to have the honor, an honor indeed, to introduce Kwame. I'm tempted to embarrass him a little teeny bit, but not too much. We go back very far. When I got the Cheryl emailed me, would I introduce Kwame? Of course, I said I would immediately. I first met him and his family when I went to Ghana in '69. And this is important, I think, into the context as to why this Ghana-Jamaica connection. Because Kwame, the interesting thing about Kwame, one of the many interesting things, and I think one of the things which drives his poetry and his literary work, is this very deep connection between Jamaica and Ghana, between the African diaspora in the West and Africa itself, which is not just a cerebral, intellectual process, but something which is deeply rooted in personal and human experiences. And I think this is one of the reasons why this experience is captured in poetry, because in fact it has deep moral and personal and psychological roots. His dad was a novelist. His mother was very active. Both of them were extremely active in Kwame Nkrumah's regime. And this was just after the coup in Ghana, and Kwame Nkrumah in '66. And of course, people who had been active with Kwame Nkrumah were not exactly welcome in Ghana at that time. So it was an extremely difficult period for anybody like Neville, Kwame's dad, and Choche's mom, and everybody of that kind who were associated with anything mildly progressive. And so eventually, Neville's dad and mom, they returned to Jamaica. His mom is Ghanaian, dad is Jamaican. And that is how when Kwame developed his Jamaican side. So we're dealing with an artist and a personality who has, as I say, deep personal and human roots on both sides of the Atlantic. And this deeply informs not only his poetry, but his plays, his perspective as an artist, I think, has this profound rootedness, which is unique, I think, that not many people, most artists today are rooted on one side, either in the Caribbean or in the United States or North America or even Latin America, or on the other side in sub-Saharan Africa or somewhere in the global south. But he's rooted in both sides, right? And this, while it presents enormous challenges, of course, to be so rooted, because instead of carrying the burden of one society on your shoulder, you're now carrying several, right? So it's not without its challenges, and it's not without its problems. I wouldn't like to convey the wrong impression that this is just a wonderful, marvelous, exhilarating situation. No, it's a difficult and tough situation, and it's the kind of situation out of which profound and moving and deep art and poetry emerges. And this is one of the things about his work. It's also, I think, the very interesting way in which his poetry has this, and his art generally, I think, has this interesting combination of spirituality, morality, and politics. It's all wrapped up together, right? And it reminds me very much of the context out of which he sprung, and very much, frankly speaking, reminds me of his mom and his dad, who are dear friends of mine, and who themselves were very important cultural and political figures in Ghana and in Jamaica. And so it's absolutely a delight, more than a delight, a duty, in a way, to introduce Kwame. And I take great pleasure in his success, although I have nothing to do with it, of course. So I take this tremendous vicarious pleasure out of watch. I say, oh, there goes Kwame again, another prize. Right? Great, more the merrier, right? But it's not a matter of accumulating prizes, which of course he has, or accumulating shares and so on, which he has, and recognition, which he has and will do. But it's a matter of the depth of his artistic creativity, the truthfulness of it, the honesty, right, and the moving quality, which only arises when an artist is really true to the difficult and hard contradictions which life presents to all of us. Kwame has, as you know, is prodigiously productive, how I do not know, right? 18 poetry collections, 2 novels, short story collections, anthologies, books, 15 plays produced. I mean, how you do it, you need to tell us at some point tonight how you manage all of this, because Many people, I think, just the plays alone would occupy the life of several individual artists. But he's managed this, and in addition to which, he's the director of the Calabash Literary Festival, founder as well, I think, with Colin Channel, which is in Jamaica, annual in Jamaica. It's coming up soon, I think. Yeah. It's a very interesting, very important literary festival. Again, one which has brought together a lot of artists, principally from, but not exclusively, from the global south. But has been very successful and has been driven. The good thing about it is that it's a festival from the south, rooted in the south, right? Which then reaches out across the world and has been, again, very successful. In particular, I find you're having, we're talking about yes, Chigozie Obioma coming, bridging the gap between poets and artists from sub-Saharan Africa and those from the West, and really bringing people together in a genuine exchange of issues and interests and common ideas and common experiences. Kwame's professor of English at the University of Nebraska. I'm trying to get the official title, it's very grand. It's Chancellor's Professor of English at the University of Nebraska. He is Glenn Alushai, Editor-in-Chief of Prairie Schooner, the Kave Kanem Faculty Fellow at teaching in the MFA program at Pacific University. He has a number of poetry prizes. He has done that most remarkable thing, which is the African Book Poetry Foundation. Really interesting, where he has found a way to to bring and publish the work of poets and artists in Africa and bring them to a wider audience, which is a very difficult thing to do. So he has tapped in, not just emotionally, and not just rhetorically or even artistically, to what is being created in sub-Saharan Africa, but he has set up practical institutional arrangements, in other words, hard cash, right? Without which none of these things happen. So without doubt, together with his tremendous artistic skill, there's without doubt an entrepreneurial element here, which I think is admirable and is part of something which explains his effectiveness. So you're certainly not here to hear me yammer on, right? But I was going to go into some sort of absurd nostalgia about his mother and father and so on and so forth, and when I first met him and all of that drama and so on. But I don't think this is the occasion for it. Maybe another time. Kwame Dawes.
Good evening. Thank you, Don, and thanks, Sheriff, for having me. I thought I'll say quickly what I hope I will do tonight, and as I understand it, I'll read some poems, and then there'll be a time for some question and answer and conversation, which I hope you'll be able to participate in as well. So. A couple of quick things. I have to make apologies. I know this is New York and fashion is very important. And I'm wearing sneakers because it's not a fashion statement. I would normally wear shoes out of respect for God knows who. But I'm wearing sneakers because my ankle hurts.
You're wearing Adidas.
But it's Adidas, so I get some props here, apparently, yeah. Secondly, I apologize, but my apology is limited because, of course, this is New York and Trump won soundly here, and you should be embarrassed by that. So,
But not in Manhattan.
yeah, but you know, it's you people, all right? So I'm just saying. Not that he didn't do great in Nebraska, God knows. Anyway, so on that friendly note, I thought, I have to tell you, readings are really difficult for me these days because, and it's inconvenient because I have a bunch of books coming out this year. I have a new collection of poems called City of Bones, which I'm kind of excited about. These are poems written in response to the work of August Wilson, the African-American playwright. So it's a full collection of poems in conversation with Wilson, which I'm very excited about. And then I have a collection that comes out again in the summer, which is a dialogue that I have with the poet John Kinsella, an Australian progressive writer. And we had an email correspondence in poetry, and that's been published. But it's not healthy to these books that are coming out. That my real excitement is the work that I'm doing with African poets and seeing African poets being published, because that's all I want to talk about. So it's a problem because I do have books that I need to sell, and but I just needed to know that the box sets for the African Poetry Book Fund, the chapbook box sets, they are available. Revolutionary books, wonderful to have them here. Where's the dude? Anyway. And fantastic, glad they're here. And the box sets are there, and they're to die for. They're amazing. You should check them out. And in 3 years, we've published like 30 African poets. So it's a big deal. And as I said, okay, I'm going to read some poems now of my stuff, right? But before I do that, I want to read a piece of a poem that I've been reading since his passing, the death of Kofi Awona. And some of you would know that Kofi Awona was killed in Kenya, in Nairobi. We were there together for Story Moja. I had arranged for him to come to Kenya, to Nairobi, and it was while we were waiting for him to come to an event that we got news that he had been killed. And Kofi Awona is somebody I grew up with. He's my uncle. I cared a great deal for, and he was very dear to my family. But we had just published his book of new and selected poems. And the best part of that story, the only good thing about that story was before we lost him, I had some time with him, and I could show him the cover of the book. And in true style, he said, but hey, this is official. So that was the highest compliment that he gave. So this is a short poem from Kofi Awona called Counting the Years. As usual, as in the earlier dreams, I come to the whistling shores, the voice of the high-domed crab stilled, but a chorus remains of the water creatures of earlier times, of the birth time and the dying time, the pity when we resurrect the travelers, the anchorman on our singular boat that will take us home. I'm seeing Don here, and in fact, when we were talking outside, he was talking about some of the poems. And seeing Don reminds me of my father, and he clearly was a very good friend of my father's. And I want to read a poem, which I hadn't planned to, but I think I should read it now because it would make sense. And it's called After Acceptance. My father's was a poet, briefly, and then he said he outgrew the genre. I think he just thought Walcott was too much competition, if you ask me, but that's just my humble opinion. So he decided he could take on Lamin and the other cats in fiction. So, but he had a beautiful poem which is really a poem in honor of his mother, and it ends with these beautiful lines. Then I read the monumental legend of her love and grasp her wrinkled hands. This is my poem in response. Just a quick thing, many of you, some of you are writers or starting to write and so on. I started writing poetry probably in my late teens. Saying I was writing poetry is a bit of an overstatement, but I started doing that kind of thing where lines stopped at some point and then moved to the next side. And, but despite some attention that I got, I always felt I was faking it. I always felt that what I was writing wasn't true. And people thought it was great, but I always felt I was pretending. It was all a mask. I was just pretending because there was a certain kind of truth that didn't seem there. And I've come to learn that that is something to do with voice. I wrote this poem when I was in Canada, and it was the first poem that I was writing after my father's death. And that was 4 years before that. And this is the poem that I know opened me up as a poet. And after that, everything I was writing felt true. Acceptance. 1. You were a child there from 2 to introverted 10, crafting your dreams from tattered books Teacher Dawes crammed into his shelves. Your brother was a knight, and your sisters princesses, and you wrote verse because you longed for friends. Curled in the cool underpart of the creaking house on the hill, you battled chickens for space to sketch the worlds in your head. 2. We drove there together once, you, proud of the recollection, stirred, and dared each sharp bend in the road with names like Breadfruit Curve, Star Apple Corner, and Tamarind Arch. Your laughter was nervous nearing the house, the child in you drumming a rhythm on the sweat-slick steering wheel. On the slack porch, you pointed through breadfruit leaves to the faded line of sea and sky where Cuba wavered in the midday haze. From there, as a child, you learned of otherness, worlds beyond the house, afloat in a sea of green. From there, your home became a point from which to leap. 3. I walked the overgrown paths where, fired with Arthurian legends, you galloped, mad child, on a wild, irreverent steed, dizzy in the patchwork of sunlight through the branches. The thought of you as a child is real as the trees towering, and staring upwards, I trace your steps, avoiding the trunks by the pattern of leaves in the sky. The child overwhelms my straight-back logic, and suddenly I'm sprinting, beating hoofbeats against my chest, light blazing green on my face, my shouts echoed in the tree trunks. 4. On the barbecue, dry brown pimento beans roast. The ancient chair she sat in is there where a rotting orange tree leans and sheds brittle leaves. The chair is light and fading, sucked dry by sun and salt wind. I can see her bandanaed there, sharp calico against the hill's gray, her wrinkled hands outstretched, trembling, her eyes glowing. 5. Maybe your ghosts hover above the house at night. But I came at daytime, so I'm not sure. But teachers, you taught me much in the lesson of your silent ways. While there, I smell ink and the dust sneezed as chalk dust. Your world was a noble one, you cloud of holy witnesses, who sought new worlds to replace the chain-linked silences. Daily Bible verses etched on your brow missionary zeal, and gave strength to your upright eyes. Now you hover above this house that crumbles where the wood ticks termites. Maybe, grand ones, your ghosts linger above the house, meeting there, then together swoop down, one wind lifting a tattered sheet's edge, no, one animate, now brilliant, oh. Cooling with a breath the sheen of toil on some weary back, shifting the breadfruit leaves to a rustling as eyes turn upward, smiling at the cool, not at you, not knowing the ghosts are wind. You return morose, having done your part of touching the living before dawn, and getting little thanks for it. Your return to your tombs in which you were sheltered from the swelter of sun and the tramping of my feet now in the gray and the green. And 6, I praise the dream of Sturge Town and the silent homecoming it was. I praise the songs of the ghosts sealed in my mind's chrysalis. I praise the constant leaves spinning in the pure air. I praise the hands that birthed you, worn as they were, for they glowed stained red with first blood spilled into this navel string soil where for years the ancient redback trees have stood. I praise these things, freed by her wrinkled hands. A couple of quick things I should say. My father was actually born in Nigeria. You see, my life is really complicated. So my father was actually born in Nigeria, in Warri, in Nigeria, and because his parents were teachers from Jamaica as sort of missionary teachers in Nigeria and lived there for almost 20 years. So when my father moved to Jamaica, he was about 3 or 4 years old, but he always had a perception of himself as being kind of African as well. And then he eventually moved to Ghana, where, as an adult, where he then littered the world with children. And then returned to Jamaica. So Don is correct that this swirl is part of me, but I actually see it as a gift that I cannot step away from the idea of Africa, because I'm not allowed to, and I think that's important. So the next poem I'm going to read is called African Postman. And I was in Ethiopia some years ago doing some work. I like to say things like this. I was doing some work for the BBC a few years ago. It didn't pay much, but it was. I can say stuff like that, and people are impressed. So anyway, I was doing work on. They asked me to go to Ethiopia to follow the life of Haile Selassie, who spent time in Bath in England when he was in exile. So I don't think they planned for me to go to Ethiopia, but they wanted me to go to Bath, and I thought, that's not interesting. So you should send me to Ethiopia so that I can trace the journey. So they sent me to Ethiopia. That's how you do it. So while there, I went to Sheshemani, and Sheshemani, of course, is a place where it's 500 acres of land that Haile Selassie had ceded to people of the African diaspora to return there. And there I met a man called Solomon Ephraim Wolf. And I was interviewing Solomon Ephraim Wolf, and this incident took place that I'm going to tell. So the poem is called African Postman, and it's also a title from one of the great Winston Rodney's song, Winston Rodney, otherwise known as The Burning Spear. The Burning Spear. Son, who is that? Is the African postman, Daddy. Burning Spear. East from Addis Ababa and then south deep into the Rift Valley, I can hear the horns trumpeting over the flat-roofed acacia trees. See the African women bend low with wood heavy on their backs, and the cows, goats, donkeys, and mules, sheep, and horses snapped into obedient herds by sprinting children, moving along the roadside. Life happens here. I'm traveling to the land I have heard about, Sheshemani, the green place, 500 acres of jazz benevolence. And I know now that I long to hear the rootsman tell me how, despite rumors of his passing, the natty keeps on riding, keeps on standing in the fields of praise to hold on to the faith of roots people. Brother Solomon, you put the name of Ephraim on your head and carry the face of the true Rasta, that face of an Ashanti warrior, eyes deep under heavy lids, and your skin tight as leather blacker than black. I've met you before on the streets of Kingston, there where you trod to the hiss and slander of the heathen. You, natty dread, gathering the people's broken minds into your calabash. You carry it all, tell them, return to the roots, the healing shall take place. You are burning spear's voice in the fields of Teph. You tell me of the prophecy of Marcus, and I listen to you through the phlegm, through the gruff of your voice. And suddenly, when I ask about the passing of the emperor, you rise up like a staff of correction, your voice reaching back to the mountains, your warrior self, your yardman greatness, and you speak a mystery of those who have ears but won't hear, and those who have eyes and won't see. And I know that this dread will one day stand in this soil and find his feet growing roots, that soon the earth will be darker for the arrival of Solomon. Oh, let the heathen rage, let the doubters scoff, let this Ghanaian youth whose eyes have seen the face of Jesus Christ, let him too sit and marvel at the fate of the natty. For this African postman has forsaken father and mother and has come to stand before his imperial majesty, to call only him father, and so that the father might call him son. And the world will carry on its weary march, and the ibises will swoop in the Ethiopian dusk, and the smoke will rise from wood fires, and the night will come with news that the rootsman, after 400 years of being told he is homeless, has come home. Yes, Jah has come home. Sons and daughters of his imperial majesty, Haile Selassie, earth rightful ruler, without any apology say, this is the time when I would come home. Yes, Jah, oh come and hold the fort. Nah let go, nah let go, nah let go. Banana pa pa, banana pa pa. That's a great song, man. Thank you. And now we go to the South, and it gets ugly. South Carolina. I've lived there for about 20 years, and there were 20 years of learning, there were 20 years of nurture, and 20 years of completing the diasporal experience, and reminding me that Africa exists and lives in very tangible and meaningful ways here in the United States. If you ask somebody what is the most African part of America, a lot of people will say New Orleans or so on. You're wrong. It is the low country of South Carolina. It is the Gullah Geechee people. Yeah, I know, New York, yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, that's just a recent phenomenon. I'm talking about original. I'm talking about original. And it's historically the case because it is the one group of Africans that were left alone. They were left alone because of the vicissitudes of the weather, the climate, and the work they did. They were there to plant rice. They were brought specifically to plant rice. And they were left alone to plant the rice because they knew how to plant the rice. And the climate was so bad in Beaufort and in St. Helena's Island and all of these places that the planters, the whites, spent very short time in those areas and then moved up country while all the planting and dying and living was taking place. And it's a kind of crucible, a kind of preservative of the culture. So that in Geechee Gullah language, it sounds, they've said things like ono and dokuno, all them words that we find in Afro-Caribbean language, it's all there, right? Jonathan Green, the amazing artist, who is from Beaufort and from that area, when he was a child, he went out. As part of his ritual, it was so-called church ritual. But he spent 3 days and nights out in his coming of age in the bush to find his spirit and so on. And that's how he came to know he was an artist. These rituals, these rites of passage, have existed and continue to exist in those communities. It's not a joke, but you can't just walk in there because they'll tell you they don't know what you're talking about. And that's how they've preserved that culture, right? For so many years. And I learned that. I learned that in a very funny incident because, when we moved there, we decided to go to St. Helena's Island to see the Penn Center. And, we're lost. And I don't know how you could get lost because it's really one road. But we weren't sure. So I stopped. This is in 95. So I stopped, went into a store, like a convenience store, to ask directions. And then this woman was giving me direction, but she was mocking me. I mean, it was just mocking because she was like talking back my accent, like pretending that, it was mocking. It was very, very disturbing. I found that rude. So anyway, I just said, leave me alone. I went and picked up some things and so on. And then 2 other women came in, and 3 of them were mocking me. They were doing the same thing, all 3 of them, mocking my accent. So I stormed out of the place, went in the car, I told my wife, I said, these people, I don't understand these people. And they're all black people. Like, why are they behaving like that? Why would they mock me because I talk differently and so on and so forth? So, in a huff we went. So we get to the Penn Center, and we go to the Penn Center, and then there's a thing called Gullah language, right? And you put on headphones, and then you press a button, and then you listen to Gullah language. And I'm listening to Gullah language. It's the same women talking. I said, what the heck? What? Then I realized they weren't mocking me. They were actually welcoming me. It was as if we were speaking my language, you know? So this is a true story. So anyway, but this one is not a fun story. How to pick a hanging tree. Charleston, South Carolina. Pastoral scene in the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolias, sweet and fresh, then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Lewis Allen. Young trees may look sturdy, but they have no memory. They are green so near the surface they bend with a sudden weight. And the truth is that not all trees can carry a dead man's weight. With enough air between pointed toes and earth, with enough height so the scent of rotting can carry far enough to be a message for those who are sniffing the muggy air for news. Old as it may look, craggy bark, twisted branches, drooping limbs, old as it may seem, sitting there by the edge of the canal, that live oak understands the simple rituals of hanging. See, there is the natural notch where the rope will slip and hold, and here, angled like this, the damp air off the river carries the decay for miles and miles. Sometimes a fresh tree will simply die after the piss of a dying man seeps into its roots. Sometimes a tree will start to rot from guilt or something like a curse, but the old trees, seasoned by the flame of summer lightning, and hardened to tears, know it is nothing to be a tree, mute and heartless, just strong enough to carry a man until he turns to air. Tornado Child for Rosalie Richardson. I am a tornado child. I come like a swirl of black and darken up your day. I whip it all into my womb, lift you and your things, carry you to where you've never been. And maybe if I feel good, I might bring you back all warm and scared, heart humming wild like a bird after early sudden flight. See, I'm a tornado child. I tremble at the elements when thunder rolls. My mother womb trembles, remembering the tweak of contractions that tightened to a wail when my mother pushed me out into the black of a tornado night. I'm a tornado child, you can tell us from far by the crazy of our hair. Couldn't tame it if we tried. Even now I tie a bandana to silence the din of anarchy in these kaya thick plaits. I'm a tornado child. Born in the whirl of clouds, the center crumbled, then I came. My lovers know the blast of my chaotic giving. They tremble at the whip of my supple thighs. Tornado child, you cross me at your peril. I cling to light when the warmth of anger lashes me into a spin. The pine trees bend to me, swept in my gyrations, because I'm a tornado child. And when the spirit takes my head, I hurtle into the vacuum of white sheets, blowing, and paint a swirl of color, streaked with my many songs, because I'm a tornado child. As for Rosie Richardson, a woman amongst a group of women who were in their 70s and 80s who I interviewed in South Carolina in 1995, and maybe they were the ones who were the most welcoming. They're welcoming, they're trusting me with their stories. Was one of the things that brought me into the African-American community there in Sumter, South Carolina. And so the next poem I'll read is a poem called Black Funk, and it's based on a story that one of these women told me. Black Funk. The rigid of my jawbone is power forged in the oven of every blow I have felt. My watertight walk is something like compensation for a limp. Don't begrudge me my sachet walk, it's all I got sometimes. 'Cause I know the way you stare, pale blue eyes like a machete edge, catching the color of new sky. The way you barely whisper your order, spit out the food, complain about my shuffling gait, snorting out my funky smell, find fault in each task I do, never right, never good enough, curse my children like dogs, 'cause I know you just hurtin', drooling your bitterness when my back is turned, when the shape of my black ass swings that way you hate, sashaying through this room of daggers. I know you're wondering what I've got down there in my belly, in my thighs, make him leave your side, crawl out of his pale, sick skin and howl like a beast at night, whimper like a motherless babe, suckling on me, suckling on me. You can't hide the shame you feel to know I sometimes turn him back. I know you know it from the way he comes on you hard and hurried, searching for a hole to weep his soul in. Yes, I turn him back when I want, and he still comes back for more. I got my pride sometimes. I know the way you try to read me, try to be me, can't be me, never be me, never feel the black of me, never know the blues in me, 'cause you never want to see you in me, even though we bleed together, finding each other's tidal rhythm and bloat together like sisters, hoarding the waters of the moon together. So I sashay through your life, averting the blades with my leather skin. I abuse you, and when he bawls, that is my pride at work, all I got sometimes. I will cook your meals until he keels over. And you just have to take it, 'cause I took it with no fuss when he forced his nothing self on me, while my babies sucked their thumbs within the sound of my whimpering. I paid, baby. I'm just reaping what y'all just done sowed. All right, 2 more poems, yeah? That's good. And then we can talk. What, 2, 3? 3? I'll do 3. All right, you're begging. I'll do 3. 3 more poems. It's a poem called Rope. This is one of the poems for August Wilson. I can't say enough about what I think is the importance of August Wilson's work. As an African in the diaspora, as a voice that speaks so many narratives, both in the things that he says and the absences in his work. I remember once he was at a conference and he was berated for his treatment of women. So he then wrote Gem of the Ocean with the woman as the lead character, and so quickly trying to correct things. But it's good. That's good for a brother to kind of go, yeah, that was a problem. I need to fix that. But his work is really important. And this is a poem called Rope, because there's a speech in one of the plays about a rope that triggered this poem to some extent. So I'm going to do something odd. I'm going to read the last line of the poem first, the last section of the poem, and then I'll start the poem. This is how the poem ends. Someday, a soul will come out of the fields to claim it, and then we will know. Someday, a soul will come out of the fields to claim it, and then we will know. Rope. To hold our lives together on the cart before the slow march after midnight, along back roads, blind driving, the scent of the exhaust making us drowsy, every shadow in the fields a threat of sorts. We use rope thick as 2 thumbs side by side, pulling hard on the knot to keep our parts from falling by the wayside. We have kept this rope supple with oil, constant use, never letting it stay idle long enough to rot. It is hard to look at the coiled silence of our strongest rope and not think of what it has held. The heavy gray-green battered bucket knocking the stone sides of the wall, top water spilling back down, this cherished substance carrying our lives. The mare, white and gray, plodding across the wide open field at dusk, her head heavy with labor, the rope a caress against her neck, the way she turns towards a gentle tug. We hold the balance of our need in this rope, the dead weight of June bug at dawn, his skin still steaming, his beautiful black skin catching the morning light tender among the leaves. How we found him there, his neck stretched, the wrapping of several yards of taut rope around the drooping branch. Where we found it, how we undid the knot, let his body down into our arms, then carried it like a soldier's flag bearing it behind the cart, shaking along with his swollen body. This ordinary rope, this gift we cannot forget, this remembrance of what we have lost. Someday, a soul will come out of the fields to claim it, and then we will know. I've done a lot of work reporting on HIV/AIDS in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, in Haiti. And I've written a lot of poems responding to those, the struggles of people and the triumphs of people. When I was in Jamaica, maybe about 8 or so years ago, I was interviewing a man called John Mazuka, who was running a place called the Hope's Hospice in Montego Bay, which was an indigent home, a home where people living with AIDS went to die, essentially. In the height of the epidemic in Jamaica, before they easier access to antiretroviral drugs, they were losing 30 people a week at that center from HIV/AIDS. So I asked him a question. I said, all the people who have come through here, does anybody stand out to you? And I really didn't think it was a good question, to be honest with you. And he said, yeah, I can think of 3 people. He was immediate. And he said there was a girl who came in when she was about 10 years old. She had been raped by her father, who was HIV positive, who believed he had gotten it from the mother, and so he was punishing her. The mother was dead, he died, and then she came in HIV positive. And he said she just lit the whole place with joy and laughter and so on. And then she died. And he said he'll never forget that. The second story, he said, was the man who loved mangoes, he said. He said the man just loved mangoes. But every time he ate mangoes, he would throw up because he was sick. He was dealing with the disease. And one day, he just said to John, he said, John, I'm dying. And John says, yeah, I think you're dying. He said, John, I love mangoes. And John said, I know you love mango, but you can't eat the mango. He said, but why I can't eat the mango? He said, because you're going to throw up. He said, but I'm dying. So what is the big problem? So John said they gathered mangoes, man, every kind, Bombay, Julie, everything like that, and they just sat there and had a mango party. And he ate and threw up and ate and threw up, and he was the happiest man in the world. And then he died. And then the final story he told was it was a simple night, he said. They were just sitting down talking. It was before Christmas. And this is the poem, Coffee Break. It was Christmas time. The balloons needed blowing. And so in the evening, we sat together to blow balloons and tell jokes. And the cool air off the hills made me think of coffee. So I said, coffee would be nice. And he said, yes, coffee would be nice. And smiled as his thin fingers pulled the balloons from the plastic bag. So I went for coffee, and it takes a few minutes to make the coffee, and I did not know if he wanted cow's milk or condensed milk. And when I came out to ask him, he was gone, just like that. In the time it took me to think, cow's milk or condensed, the balloons sat lightly on his still lap. Okay, so I'm going to end with a poem for my wife, Lorna. I think I'll do 2 poems, okay? It's bad to do this one and then don't do the other one. Because they're both for my wife, and one kind of come off bad, so I have to do the other one to correct that. Okay. So these are 2 poems from my wife, Lorna. I've known Lorna since 1980. It took us 10 years before we got married. Long story, rigmarole, up and down, me here, she there. But we made it through. We got married in 90, and we're still married. So in a sense, this is a poem about one key stage in our lives. The egg and the teacup. for Lorna. 1. Perhaps I should have asked your father for your hand, and perhaps he should have said no, just to show us he could. Then we would not wonder if it mattered at all to him. We might not have felt so on our own. 2. They never made it to your wedding. A cousin had one too, and they had to go, they said, and did. And you, they thought, could take it. And we, they thought, could handle it, so we did. He may not have meant to, but he taught me not to fear your body broken easily. But you were strong, weren't you? It takes years to learn how much you've longed to be the fragile one, the delicate vessel. 3. This was my betrayal, to think you could take it, while I cupped the fragile catastrophes of others. For my vanity and the lie of misplaced care, forgive me, forgive me. I'm learning the language of husbandry, how to tend beauty, to listen to the power of a broken thing, a cup, some china, almost transparent, 2 broken pieces in a bed of soil, gleaming. 4. Not that you never tried before. I simply chose to read it as your stoic way, you binging on a box of jelly-filled donuts devoured in front of me, and always followed by the coolness of insouciant accusation and firm pushback alone. You would command, and I fled. You tested me so often, and I failed you. Still, you gave me an open door, as if you thought your test too hard, too advanced for me. How we compromise for love, how we survive. I'm grateful for those vivas retesting inside our hothouse, my hands learning to caress. 5. You did not hesitate, I know, to face the violence of cancer. It looked as if the body could at last show me your wounded self, and I would see how tenderly you wanted me to touch you inside, far inside. So it was not the fear of death, nothing like that, just the knowledge of how it is written that these things hidden in the dark will be revealed. I see you now. I hold you gingerly. I will learn you. I will. 6. Harder than a stone, but more fragile than an egg. As if in the dark of youth one can tell them apart, the egg from the thunder egg. And I'll end with this poem called In This Saying. This is also for Lorna, but it's also a poem that I owe to Seamus Haney's last collection of poems. And so, in this saying, 1. There's a way to end books, the gathered papers, their weighty gift, the clean parade of words in columns of paragraphs and in columns of images, the tidiness of things. And numbered they form the thing you have labored over for years. To end a book, you tie a blue ribbon around the heft, make a bow, kiss it. 2. The way to end the year of cataclysms is to find a piece of land by water where old boats rot at the edges and the place smells of ancient things, sulfur, salt, rotting fish, and the deep musk of mud and grass. To then sit on a moving jetty, rocking against the universe's pulse, and there wait for the moon. 3. To end this way alone is to end with the hollow melancholy of loss and regret. Better to end with the voice of your woman, for you will need that voice, ordinary as rain, talking your name. Perhaps it is the intrusion of her scent filling the air, or the cool of her touch slick with tomato pulp and herbs. 4. I know the gender of this poem. Do not worry. It is because I know the names of the bodies standing in the dusk by the water, Kwame and Lorna. They will hold hands, and in this saying, the poem ends. Thank you. Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, here's your chance. I omitted to say that Kwame, of course, was recipient of the Pulitzer Prize, I think, Pulitzer for the award for the
Oh, the Emmy.
Emmy
The
Award.
Emmy Award.
Pulitzer will come, but Emmy.
The Emmy in the meanwhile we'll do.
Yes, we'll do.
We won an Emmy for the
The thing on HIV.
HIV, the reporting on HIV, yeah.
And you know that we actually, I shudder to mention it, but we actually went to the same high school. a little time after
A
me.
little time after.
I realized, I knew before you, I didn't think it, but you know, I was really good, which is one of them where you refer to the talk shop.
The talk shop,
God,
yeah, at JC.
talk shop.
The talk
Jesus
shop.
God. You'd have to go to the school to realize what this is. This is a place where, do they have this in the US? I don't know. It's a kind of place where they sell food. And
It's a cafeteria.
Cafeteria, but a
but a
modest-
different, yeah.
Yes, and
yeah.
it's not a set little cakes and like donuts and pastries
Yeah,
and, you know.
yeah.
We call it a talk shop.
Yeah.
Anyhow, there's a whole drama around the talk shop, but
Yes.
let's leave the talk shop. So, any questions, any comments, any issues? Sorry.
You have a large sort of amount of resources to draw from,
Mhm.
and I would ask, what is your reviewing process in creating a work of art, whether it be a play, a poetry book?
The revision, you mean? The
Yeah.
revision part, yeah. It varies depending on the genre. I mean, plays. When I was writing actively as a playwright, I had formed a theater company. So a lot of my work, I would write quickly and then have the company work on it, and we would improvise, and then I'd rewrite until the play was right. When I left Jamaica and no longer had the company, I had to be writing, largely on spec, so that the work would go to a company and they would decide whether they could do it or not. And that was harder to do. But I think with poetry, revising is really the part that I enjoy a lot. Right? I write a first draft very quickly. This is one of the weird things about me. I write a very fast first draft. And if I there's some people who write poetry. I have friends who do it. Like they'll write one line, and then they'll go away, go do their business. They're gone off, and then they'll come back 3 days later. They'll write another line, and then just gone off again and go on with the business. And so like 2 more days later, they come and write next line. And this is how they do it, and they finish the poem like that. I mean, I don't know how they do it, but it usually comes out nice. I don't write like that. I write a quick first draft, and if I can't finish the draft, I discard it. I don't think I have a poem, because I don't know what I'm writing until I start writing it. This is absolute, and it's not magical. It's just maybe it's that I know there's a system I have, that in my day-to-day life, I'm collecting stuff in my head. That when I come to write, there's a trigger. And the trigger then helps me to start thinking about the things that I've collected. And they begin to emerge in the poems. And then when I'm finished with the poem, if I finish the draft, that's when I know what the poem is about. And then I can revise it to meet what I've found about what the poem is about. And that's where we get the structure and the order and so on. But I write a good first draft. So this is why in workshops, I'm like a hot stuff, because everybody else is like struggling. I only wrote this and I only wrote that, but here's my poem. It's like a whole poem, like not even a scratch. I just read it. It's not that great, but it's much better than the rest of the stuff that's there. So I write a good first draft, but because it's breakneck and I'm looking for what the poem is about. But the revision process, I probably finished the poem in the same amount of time that my friends who write one line at a time. When I wrote the poems Wisteria, 95, I wrote the first drafts. The book wasn't published until 2005. It's not that I spent all my life editing them, but I was still working on them for those 10 years. But I do many things at the same time, so it's not like I stopped writing to just do that. That would be really stupid.
I thought I should mention, though, that especially in the poem, Sturgeon, his family on his father's side is actually from this very interesting part of Jamaica, which is very near to where Garvey's from. Garvey's from St. Anne's Bay, Sturgeon, which you referred to in Acceptance?
Yes, Acceptance, right.
Where he's given his account of return to his native land, in a way. And Sturgetown is named after the English abolitionist Joseph Sturge. And this was one of the post-emancipation villages which were established with small farmers, and which schools were established relatively early.
Right.
And Garvey came out of this background, and Neville's, on his father's side, family came out of a very similar background in an area which is about 5 or 6 miles away from where Garvey's from. There's a parish of St. Anne on the north coast, in the hills, not on the plains. An area, interestingly, which was not a sugar plantation area. It was an area of, it was in the hills, so there's not enough flat land. So it's cattle and pimento and so on. So it's quite bananas, unique area. I think they're still voting for the same political party after 50 years. They're sort of like...
And that's where Marley was born.
Marley was born in the same area.
Spear,
it's really interesting place. I mean, it's like a part, I don't know where in New York, but it's like a place which has never voted for anybody except the Democratic Party for all its existence. I mean, as far as I can see, has no intention of changing. But on the other side, Chocho and Kofi Owuna, and on the Ghanaian side, very deep roots. His mother is a remarkable lady. A most remarkable lady with enormous political experience in Nkrumah. And in the CPP and in Nkrumah. Really a lucky man. Anyhow.
Yes.
I think the rope poem that you said was really beautiful.
Thank you.
I want to know what the rope symbolizes. Is it like a noose or is it like hope?
It's not hope. The rope is a kind of talisman of the noose. The story is basically that having found this same rope that was used to lynch Junebug, they continue to use the rope, waiting for somebody to claim it so that they will know who did it. Essentially, that's the narrative. But then the rope becomes at once a symbol of their everyday existence, and yet a memory of the torture and the horror of Junebug. Somebody, yes?
Yes, coming from these sort of different backgrounds, Jamaican and the Ghanaian background, where do you find conflict and where do you find unity based on these two cultures?
Well, I don't find any more conflict. So always in the transition is usually where the conflict happens, and the resolution of that conflict is actually what becomes the norm, and that becomes the birthing of something fruitful. So when we moved from Ghana to Jamaica, it was a very interesting transition because this was in the early 70s in Jamaica, where people didn't have that felicitous an attitude to Africa, on average. And therefore, I went into school and I was teased like horrendously about being an African. They asked very profound questions like whether I was comfortable in shoes. Turned out I wasn't, but it wasn't anything to do with being Ghanaian. It just that I didn't like shoes. But seriously, they would ask things like that, and it was hard. But my sister and I, who were at the same primary school, teamed up in interesting ways. So eventually the whole, many of our friends at school believed we had pet lions at home. They believed we knew Tarzan personally, like we met the guy, and so on and so forth. Because our only way to fight this stupidity was to be, blatantly ironic about it and so on. And so we learned the power of irony. But at the same time, the very same time, I would leave Shortwood Primary School, go down the hill where they sold, oranges and things like that to the students. And there'd be Rastas selling things like that. And the Rastas had heard that I was African. And the Rastas would call me and say, come sit down and tell me about Africa. And so they welcomed, and it was the time when I would be having this nonsense going on in school. And yet the Rastas were seriously asking me to describe food, fruit, and so on and so forth. And it stayed with me. I've never lost that respect for what and Rastas were changing Jamaica. In those 10 years of the 70s, the attitude to Africa was transformed. Even Prime Minister, Michael Manley adopted Rasta ideas and so on and so forth. My father became Institute of Jamaica director, brought people like Nyerere, Samora Machel, and all of these guys from Africa to Jamaica. So it was a fecund time of change and so on and so forth. But it wasn't always great, that period. And it's understandable. I mean, we still have the residuals of that. If you ask, African Americans even here, do they regret that they ended up here in America rather than staying in Africa? And many of them say, I ain't African, I'm American, which is a pretty disturbing thing to end up saying. At the end of the day, if you then say, so thank God that my ancestors were enslaved and brought here so that I could enjoy this wonderful thing. So that residual is psychologically understandable because it's not accidental. It was designed to create that kind of resentment and to twist the narrative of diaspora. Not all diaspora thinks that way about its past. Do you understand what I mean? No. Not all diaspora does that. Other diaspora cherishes that past and actually thrives on that past in ways that we still are learning to do. We still are learning to do here. So it's not conflicting for me. I don't feel conflicted, but I feel enriched by these connections. And I'm not saying that to just be cute. I just don't. If I go to Ghana and I say I'm Ghanaian, they start talking to me in Ghana. I say, no, I can't really do that. They say, oh, but you're Brony then. I say, well, I know if you bury me, my ancestors will say, hey, Kwame, welcome. So I'll work it out. So you know that and I know that. So this is not complicated, right? Yeah. Another question and then we'll go to the, yeah, go ahead.
I was just laughing at the story about lions in the backyard.
Yes.
Because my little niece, who was in kindergarten, was born in the United States.
Yes.
Knows everything. Went to kindergarten, and the children started asking her about Africa. She knows nothing.
Right.
She was making up these same kind of stories. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we have lions as pets, and we have this and monkeys and this. And the teacher called and said, what is this nonsense?
Because that's against the law.
But not in Jamaica.
Yeah. Yeah.
These children are so stupid. I
That's-
decided to just make up stuff so they can.
That's right. Yeah.
This is a kindergarten talking.
Well, that was I get that. We understand that fully. Yeah, good. Yes.
As an outside observer,
Outside of what? What are you outside of?
Nebraska.
Oh, okay.
Because as an outside observer, it seems like you created this very vibrant mecca there in Nebraska, and I just wanted to hear what it was like for you there. Is it really? It looks.
What, a mecca of what? African this and that and so on and so forth like that?
Poetry.
Poetry.
Yeah.
Well, no, just everything that you have going on at the university.
I take the party with me, man. The party must go with me. I can't go somewhere and don't have the party there. Where I go, the party follows me. That's my plan. I have to be comfortable. So if I'm going somewhere, I'm going to make people come there and try and make this place happen because that's what I inherited.
This is so Jamaican. It's like,
No, because I don't see the point, So wherever it is, we have to make it happen. Plus, I kind of feel I'm on a kind of like a mission, and whatever resources I can use to see this happen, I will use it. Yeah.
But the literary magazine just seems to be this, the sports issue.
Yeah. All of that. Yeah. I'm just really good. That's all. No. No, but it's thanks for noticing though. But it is the prairie. I know. I'm sorry. What was I saying to somebody outside? Jamaica is what slavery did to Ghana. So you just work with that. Jamaica is what slavery did to to Ghana. So Jamaica is loving, caring, and so on and so forth, but they'll fight you. So, but that fight is because of slavery. That fight becomes one of Jamaica was it remains historically one of the worst and most deplorable sites of slavery ever in the world. And for people to come out of that unaffected and unshaped by it would be impossible. So what we see in Jamaica that is thriving and exciting and so on, but also that can be so destructive, it's a direct result of that violence. It absolutely is, yeah. So yeah, to that. But I wanted to just say about Prairie Schooner, it's 90 years old. It's a long tradition, and each editor has brought a different kind of development to it. And it's only had 4 editors. I think I'm the 4th one, right? Before me was Hilda Raz. And what Hilda Raz did in the 30 years she was there is that she made Prairie Schooner the mecca for women poets and women writers. So all the excitement that we see with people like Sharon Olds and March Piercy and so on and so forth, they were publishing in Prairie Schooner at a time when it was difficult for them to get their work everywhere else. And she made a huge difference with that. So I moved in with that and I inherited that, and I'm grateful for that because we've kept we have a good Vida rating, as they say, because you gotta watch that. So we have a good Vida rating. But at the same time, I had to bring my idea that it needs to be more diverse and more international in its scope. And that became the intention. And I think that quality of the international energy that has come to the journal has been my kind of stamp on it, but building on things that others had done. So no, I don't. I mean, I know that's my direction, but it is part of my thing of saying, look, I have to do things I'm passionate about, and that's what brings the passion to it. So, yeah.
One of the things that you're very involved in is Calabash.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Is that happening this year?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a lineup?
What's that?
Is there a lineup?
There's a lineup. It's on the website. It's out, and I'm it has all kinds of. I could read it. Huh?
It's every 2 years.
Yeah. So Calabash happens every 2 years now. It's been every 2 years for the last 3 Calabashes. We were going once a year from 2001, and then we started to do it every 2 years. Part of it is funding. We are now able to get, it's hard, Calabash is a free festival. So we don't charge anybody. We get 2,000-3,000 people at the festival, at a reading. And Jamaicans come from all walks of life. A lot of profilers, Jamaicans can profile. So some of them don't really come for the literature, but it's a nice place to dress up and look. Beach wear and everything there. And it's nice. And the food nice, and the music nice, everything nice. So and then you can say, I was at Calabash, so I'm bright, and that kind of thing. But there's a real interest in it, and so it's free though, and we've been given a lot of pressure to charge, and we've resisted it for 2 reasons. One is, it's free, and we don't pay the writers who come in. We don't pay them their fee. They donate their time, and they donate their time because it's a free festival. And the other reason is we believe that there needs to be something in Jamaica that is free, something good and of a high quality that is a gift to the community. And we've stuck with that, and we won't change that. So we do it every 2 years. And this year is an exciting lineup. We have about people from 12 different countries. We have a great Nigerian contingent, Teju Cole, Chris Abani, Obioma, Chigozie Ogioma. We have people from Macedonia, from Russia. I mean, it's a rich, and then a lot of Jamaicans like Marlon James, who has been doing well, Kai Miller, and so on. And Nikki Giovanni is coming, so that's very exciting. So that should be a long session. Was it? No, it's going to be the first weekend in June. First weekend in June, yeah. First weekend in June, yes.
I felt I was going down memory lane when I heard about Nkrumah, Nairi. I went to UE.
Yes.
Okay.
St. Augustine campus.
Yeah, I hear it. I hear it.
Thank you for bringing that back.
Yeah.
I'm a professor here in education leadership,
Mhm.
education, and we always know that arts is one of the first things to get cut.
Yes.
And also, as we prepare teachers, I prepare teachers who are going to be school leaders. Teachers do not have the experiences of different cultures,
Right.
especially of the students in their classroom.
Right.
So I was wondering if any of your work, if you have outreach to any schools,
Yeah.
if you've done,
Yeah.
and what was that like for you? And
Well, the inevitable happens when you have children, right? So I have 3 kids, and they used to be kids. And so when they were young, I was a regular at all their schools, and then all the schools, this is in South Carolina, storytelling and blah, the whole thing, and so on and so forth. And I continue to do that. It's since I've moved to Nebraska that I haven't been able to do it as much. But my wife and I also developed something called Towards a Poetry-Friendly School. It was a project that we worked with teachers to train teachers who are afraid of poetry, not to be afraid of poetry. So we work with principals and teachers and so on. And it still exists, and we took it around to the schools. We invested in, all these books, poetry books for children, young adult novels in verse and so on, which is a hot thing in the late 2000s, early what I mean, like 2000 mash, and it was an attempt to really bring this very idea that if you can get teachers to be comfortable with poetry, they could learn this practice of, because I really believe that you can give me any topic that interests you, any passion that interests you, and I can find a first-rate set of poems about that subject that you'll enjoy. I can do that because I know enough poetry. I mean, and poetry deals with everything. And so helping them to see that was one of the exercises. I find that once people get over the anxiety, see, the problem is people don't think poets are your friend, This is the problem. People think poets are your enemy. And why do people think that? It's because of school. Because when you went to school, at some point the teacher said, what does the poet mean? And then you went, oh no, this is a problem. At first, you used to just enjoy the poem, and then all of a sudden now you have to know what it means. Well, who knows better what the poem means but the poet? But the poet is not telling you. And that's the problem. So your next question is, so why doesn't the poet just say that? Why do you have to say it this way? And then you start hating the poet. You may not think you hate the poet, but deep down you really hate the poet. Because the poet is a problem. The poet is making you look stupid. This is why when people come to me and say, Kwame, your poetry is deep, it means they don't like me. What that means is, in that conversation, they mean I didn't understand a word you said, and I know that the safest thing I can say to look smart is to say, it's deep, right? And I would say thank you, and then that would be the end of that, right? So the task is to say, no, the poet actually is trying to communicate. It's actually trying to say things in a way that will make you go, I've never heard. And to make people relax about their relationship with poetry is, to me, one of the biggest tasks that we have. Because teachers, you've been in school, right? you see in English class, the poetry unit, right, lasts like a week. Okay, it's like, okay, the poetry unit, oh, poetry. The teachers, like, yeah, oh, poetry. 1 week, and then they're done. Okay, let's get to the real books, like the real stuff, which is a problem, right? So I think that needs to happen. That work needs to happen. Because we are friends. We are nice poets. We're really nice people.
You're not so sure. Sorry, please.
Yeah.
Oh, dear Feynman, the poet lied.
That's right.
I was just wondering if you could speak about the work that you did in Haiti and in Jamaica with HIV.
HIV.
Yeah, so,
And what communities did you work with?
yeah, so I forget some years ago, maybe about 10 years ago, journalism has changed a lot, and many of the international bureaus and so on have shut down. And a lot has happened that freelance journalism has become the operative way. And if you're a journalist, you can't say, I just write print, or I just do photography. You have to do everything. This is just the new normal, right? And consequently, with all the bureaus shutting down around the world, funding and support for investigative journalism abroad was shrinking. So outfits like the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting emerge and say, look, we're going to start a media center that gives grants to freelance journalists to travel around the world to write stories, and then they will broker the placement of those stories in PBS, anywhere, newspapers and so on and so forth, and they will help broker those stories, but they'll give funding to support the journalists. Well, they came to me at one stage and said they had gotten money from MacAIDS, and they get funding from international corporations, they get funding from all kinds of places. And it's always tricky because you ask the question, so they said they had gotten some money from MacAIDS to do HIV, to report on HIV in Jamaica. And they wanted me to do it. And I said, well, no, because I'm not a journalist. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. And I'm a poet and so on. And also, while I've had interest in HIV and written about it, they don't know that. And so they shouldn't ask me. I said, there are people who are like real experts and so on. But they kept insisting, and they said the reason they wanted me to do it was because I think it was because I knew Jamaica, and because they said they wanted a writer. That's all they wanted, a writer. So I agreed to do it, and I went to Jamaica and began to investigate the status of HIV/AIDS in Jamaica. I met with many people. Eventually, it led me to meeting people living with the disease and interviewing a lot of people with the disease. I became very close to them. There were about 5 trips back and forth to Jamaica. And I know Jamaica. My family is there, and I was there. So that reporting led to this Live, Hope, Love, which was the one that won the Emmy website and things like that, and many stories and many relationships. So since then, I went back to Jamaica to look at the church and HIV/AIDS, and we did a piece on that that has been published in different places. And then I went to Haiti, and it was Haiti after the earthquake. And this was prompted by us, by me and my friend Andre Lambertson, the photographer. After the earthquake took place, I was in Oregon at the time when the earthquake had happened, and he called me right away and says, I think we should go to Haiti. And I said, no, it says an earthquake there. I don't know if you noticed. He said, no, I really think we should go there and report. And I said, well, what are we going to report on? And he said, well, I just want to go. He's a hardcore journalist, right? So I said, all right, I'll think about it. And so I started to think about HIV and how, because Haiti had made so much progress with the work against HIV and fighting it. And we're really doing fantastic work. And the anxiety was that the earthquake will destroy all of that. And so I decided to with Andre, that would go to Haiti and report on what was happening with HIV/AIDS in Haiti after the earthquake. So about 2 months after the earthquake, we did about 4 or 5 trips there. And we interviewed people. We interviewed a whole range of people. I became very close to many people. And in all the projects we do, we take it back. So we don't just report here, but we take the piece back. We have a meeting with everybody who is in the stories, and we report back what we've done. And I bring poetry into it, music and things like that. So we did a performance there for them. And it's meant a great deal. I mean, those stories have existed, and the books exist that tell those stories. And we've done fairly well in getting some attention for that work. I think the biggest difference is people trust journalists are not as skeptical about the idea that you can report. There's a story you can tell through art that you cannot tell through straight conventional journalism. And since I'm doing both, it's very obvious what the difference is. You know, in journalism, I have to, if somebody tells me something, a woman I say to her, do you love your husband who gave you the disease? And she might say yes. But she and I know she means no. Yeah, but just by her body language, I can't report that as a journalist. I have to get her to say no. But I can put it in a poem, though. So, yeah.
I'm just so blown away by how many books of poetry? Did you say 18? Or did it?
18.
Well, yeah, let's just say that.
And the plays.
And counting.
Yeah, and more coming.
Wondering how you manage that with teaching and all this other stuff. I mean, how do you talk about a little bit about your writing life?
My writing life? Oh, I don't know. I just write when I can.
How do you fit it in with everything else?
You know, I think people underestimate how much time there is in life. You know, I really feel that way. I think it's a trick that writers have played, that it takes a lot of time. Most of my time is spent watching Hulu, Netflix, and HBO now, and ESPN. Honestly, my children, they will tell you, they have never, ever heard me say, Daddy can't come now because he's writing. I've never said that. I've never, ever said those words. Because it's a thing I do, like I do quietly. I do in the toilet. I do when I'm working with them. I do when I'm playing. I do it whenever I can get the time in, because I have to do it. You know, I can't explain it any other way. I don't think it's not precious. It's a thing you do because you have to do it. I want to go to do it, so I don't have to. When I get a chance to do it, I go for it because I want to do it. So it's not precious. But I'm a focused kind of guy. You understand what I'm saying? Like, if I want to do something, I'm gonna do it. But I love doing it too. So I'm not helpful here on this one. I'm not very helpful on this one.
I mean, but you also need time for, I find I write.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time editing, looking at it, and
Yes.
changing this and coming back and changing that.
Yes.
And so to me the poem comes sometimes quite,
At the wrong time.
but then,
Yeah.
but then I always feel it has to be shaped and it has to be,
Yes.
dressed and all that.
Yes.
So that to me takes time.
It takes time, but here's the thing. I think my skill is the ability to forget the things I don't really need to remember at a given time. So I can clear my brain. So, and I'm not ashamed to say, yeah, I forgot you asked me to do this. I just forgot. Remind me again. I'm not ashamed of that. I really don't sweat the small things in my life. So I can blank them out. I really can blank them out. The important things in my life, is my family, and that's the important thing in my life. Like the writing thing, if I couldn't do the writing, I'd feel bad, yeah.
But you teach as well, right?
Yeah, I teach, but I'm a bad teacher, so don't.
Obviously, this is not true. This is not true.
I'm not as
We
committed
can
to
rule that
them.
out. This is absolutely not true.
But in some ways I see teachers doing things that I say, well, I really wouldn't do all of that for you. I'm sorry. Like some things I won't put, but I work at it. But I don't know. I cannot say that.
That's amazing.
I tell my students that when they say I couldn't find the time, I say, no, that's a lie. Because if I take you through your day, I guarantee you, whole heap of time wasting upon nothing at all, upon foolishness. Me can take you through your day and show you. Every minute you waste time. People do that regular. This is a regular thing. But you think you're using the time wisely. A lie. It's not true. And the one thing I won't do is lie to myself. You think I'm joking about Netflix and them thing. I watch them thing, the punna, it's like a curse. I watch enough movie and them thing. But it's research. It's research from my it's pure research. I claim that in my taxes. I'm sorry.
Any more questions?
Any more questions? Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your time in Ethiopia when my dad asked you to do the piece for Haile Selassie?
I wish it was longer, but I was there for about maybe 2 weeks. Yeah. So there was the Sheshimani part of it, which was good. And then I went around the country, but not very far from Addis. And I spent a lot of time in Addis and got malaria in Addis. But Ethiopia was a big deal for me going there. Going there because of Rasta, because of reggae. I was able to meet with the granddaughter of Haile Selassie. And, you know, she was there and she met with me. And, you know, she talked, because that family was, when Selassie was in prison and then he was killed, they were in big problems in trying to get out of Ethiopia. And Bob Marley, she said, was the one who found the money, gave his money to get them out of Ethiopia. She said something very interesting. She said her family is grateful to Bob Marley and Rastas, even though they don't agree with them that he's God. But they said if there was no reggae, nobody would remember Haile Selassie. No, nobody. We'd only remember him as, people would remember him falsely as just an old dictator who died at some point. If there was no reggae, and she said that was one thing, and the second thing was how Marley himself, Bob Marley, who was close to her uncle. Bob Marley was very helpful in getting them out of Ethiopia and spending the money for that. Yeah. So that was a very interesting kind of exchange. Yeah. But I mean, you know, it's a short time, but it was very meaningful to me to be there. There are problems there and all the headaches and so on, but it's yeah. The architecture was very funny because it's very Italian influence, but also the Soviet influence. So there's some bad buildings, some Soviet era buildings, which are just really not attractive. But you can see them as that period. But at the same time, that for all its headaches, the impulse of community and so on and so forth seemed to be something that was part of existing as part of the culture. But I can't be an authority on Ethiopia from that short trip. Yeah, but those things stood out to me. Yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thanks very much, sir. Thank you.